Thank you, Mr. Sharp, and thank you to the whole panel. Commissioner.
In your written testimony, you mentioned that 3 times in the past 14 years, coal deliveries were below, well, the shortages were severe and caused you to have to reduce and buy elsewhere or reduce output. Were your stockpiles at that time 30 to 45 days, as you say, is a normal level, or were the stockpiles at those times less than they are today?
I don't have those exact numbers with me, but the inventory targets were a little bit less than what the inventory targets have now been set at after this last meltdown with the joint line. And this kind of gets back to something that was said before that is totally wrong from my standpoint. We don't set our inventory targets based on what we think the coal price is going to be. The inventory targets, the primary factor for setting inventory targets is the reliability of the rail transportation to the plant. If we had 100% reliable rail transportation to the plant, we just put it on a conveyor into the burner and burn it. You know, we wouldn't have a need for that additional cost.
I think it's been alleged that the utilities were operating much the same as the retail sector in the sense of trying to bring down inventories and free up resources so you don't carry such large inventories, and that was part of the reason why any glitches in the supply of material from the PRB caused real shortages at the plants. And I was just wondering to what extent there was truth to that argument.
I think if you look at our situation, you would not find that correlation.
Okay. Derry Land, yes, sir.
Can I add to that? 'Cause
Sure.
I think it's important to point out a number of things with inventories in the past. And it's another point of misinterpreting data and making wrong conclusions. If you go back to the time when the PRB was just starting out, there wasn't a lot of production coming out of the PRB in the 1980s. The inventory targets that were set for a lot of utilities at that time, they were burning Eastern coal or burning Illinois coal. It was barge coal. A lot of inventory targets, the river freezes up for 6 months of the year, and a lot of people at that time, the utility that I worked for, when I started working for them, they were selling off their barges because they were converting to PRB coal. Prior to that time, we had 6 months of coal on the ground to get through the wintertime. So, and people use whatever year as the base and compare it with today, it's erroneous because those targets were set for different reasons, and barging being one of them. And it wasn't as reliable of a system as it became when the Powder River Basin was developed. In the mines, you know, it's very difficult to build systems for the peaks. The mines have pit inventory to get them through the peaks, but they can't, you know, it's too expensive to build a system to produce coal at the peak level. The railroads don't have the storage capacity for the peak level. The only place left to have the surge capacity to get through the peaks is really the stockpiles at the plants. And the plants deal with the peaks, and the peaks go up and down as the demand changes, the load changes from hour to hour, minute to minute, changes from season to season. But we have to respond in the power plants. We have to respond to the peak. We have to provide electricity to those peaks. So that stockpile is always changing. The people that we wear out equipment, we wear out people running that coal out to the stockpile and running it back into the plant. And I mean, we have in '93, you know, there was the Great Flood. There was a 500-year, 1,000-year flood. People had run their inventories down, and they started running them back up. But it's really based, you know, on reliability. But we are expected to handle the peak, and that's what sets the inventory policy.
Yeah, I mean, obviously, if you run out of coal, the price you pay is very, very high if you've got the blackouts and blackouts. But
well, it's a real high price for me because I get fired.
question to you then, Mr. Richards. You mentioned about the railroad cycle times going up. Why would the railroads want to not be concerned about reducing cycle times? It would seem to me that that would improve their capacity. You would have the equipment turning around more quickly.
Well, they may, I don't know. I mean, they may be frustrated by it. I know they've obviously made additional investments in 2006 and now into 2007. And we haven't necessarily seen all that. So we don't know whether the capacity increase has been just to store more equipment on tracks, because it doesn't seem to have gone into increasing velocity. And I know that's what their goal is, and that's what they would like to accomplish, but we haven't seen that yet. Is it crews? Is it locomotives? You know, I know there's some statements about, you know, the mines. You know, we only started measuring delays at the mines recently. I don't know if that's normal. I don't know if it's exceptional. We don't have data that goes back to how many mine problems there were in 2000 or 1995. We don't have that baseload data. I don't know if that's an anomaly in the data. So I don't know. I can't point to any one thing that I can see. I know there's maybe when we get some of the cutovers, you know, in this next section of track, maybe things will improve, but we haven't seen it yet. And we have out of 1,300 cars we had several years ago, we have over 1,700 cars today. So we've picked up 15-20% more cars that we've had to go out and acquire for our membership to deliver the same amount of coal.
You indicated in your testimony also that you seem to be observing price signaling on the part of BN and UP. Is that correct?
Well, when you have public pricing, I mean, you have price signaling taking place with the airlines when they publish their rates going to from Washington, D.C. to Denver.
That's true, but
And the airlines,
would you argue that there's not price competition in the airline industry today? I mean, the prices
Well,
are publicly put there, but there's obviously price competition in the airline industry.
Well, obviously, if you're flying from Minneapolis to Billings, you might not have the same competition, but we like competition.
Yep. Energy mentioned defective tracks as being a problem. What do you mean by defective tracks? The railroads say they put an awful lot of money into the Powder River Basin, put double tracking, triple tracking, and in some places quadruple tracking. There have been problems with coal dust and the like, but are you suggesting that there was defective track due to inadequate maintenance, or is it due to something else?
The data was taken from the Federal Railroad Administration, and it reported by the railroads as to what was the cause of derailments over time. And there is a cause that's listed on the Federal Railroad Administration's website in accident reports that is defective track as the cause. And that is the data that's reported on there. I'm not necessarily suggesting anything on the other than the fact that is the defective, the cause of derailments from defective track as reported by the railroad. And I think it does relate to the fact that if you have increased track causes, that it has to have some reliance on track maintenance issues.
There's been some talk about fugitive coal dust causing the track problems. Is that something that's you've been made aware of too, that this fugitive coal dust is a problem, and it's causing the rights of way, the ballast, etc., to get fouled, and for the tracks to fail more often? Is that something you've seen, Mr. Richards?
Thank you.
Well, you gave.
I'm not involved in that litigation, so. Obviously, we're working together through the NCTA to try to resolve the issue. First of all, I think we're looking at trying to study the causes and get a better handle on what the causes are before we start addressing solutions. And I guess that's where we're at. But we're working to, hopefully we work together to solve that.
Okay.
Could I
Yes, sure.
add? I'm not sure whether you understood the moment of levity here. You seem to be pointing your question at first to Jeff Herndon, and Jeff Herndon's company is one that's being sued for trespass and nuisance of the dust that left their cars.
I recall that. That's one of the reasons I switched to. Well, back to Dairyland, over to Dairyland. You said you had a 93% increase in your rates in January of 2006. 93% over what time period, however?
If I understand your question,
In other words, was it over a 1 year period? Was it over?
it was from the expiration of our 3-year contracts.
But a 93% increase from when was the rate established? And
It was 3 years before.
So it was a 3
It's a 3-year contract.
Okay, 90% over 3 years.
The